Welcome to the Build Your Beautiful Business podcast with your host, Julie C. Butler. If you're looking to build the business of your dreams, then this is the space you want to be in. Join Julie as she talks about ways that you can successfully scale your profitable dream business, one that will give you ultimate time freedom and the abundant lifestyle you deserve. Julie will take you by the hand, sharing with you her business savvy strategies as she chats it up with her favorite online entrepreneurs. You'll get a weekly dose of boosted confidence as you learn as they reveal their insight, tips, and tools that you need to start building a profitable dream business of your own, one that you'll love and that works for you on autopilot.
Hey there, welcome back to the BBB Summit. Today we have Bri Williams. Bri is a speaking strategist, and she helps expert entrepreneurs launch speaking businesses, become paid speakers, and market their offers from dream stages. After nearly 20 years in talent development, she began her paid speaking career utilizing her learning and coaching experience to speak on diversity, leadership, and women's development through speaking, confidence, and executive presence. The Pro Speaker Income launch opened in 2020, supporting experts launching their speaking business to gain paid speaking and guest speaking opportunities. Australian born, and after a decade of living in London, Bri is now based in the south of France, if you can't pick the accent. Hey there, Bri. How are you today?
I'm so great and really happy to be joining you from the south of France, as we've just figured out we've got something in common, which is me somewhat speaking French and you
Yes.
using that as a secret language.
I know. I grew up in French, but having an English speaking husband and an English speaking household, and like when you go to school all your life in French, but then you start working and it's English environment, it's so easy to lose a language, right? Yeah.
I'm still trying to find mine, but yes, I absolutely understand it. So it's like a muscle. You got to keep building it,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. And it's funny because we're moving to Costa Rica in a couple of months, like I was telling you. I mean, at the time of this recording anyway, but I'll be learning Spanish, but there's no point in me learning Spanish now because I have nobody to speak it with. And so right? So I might as well just wait to get there and then dive right in, which is probably something you've done when you moved to France. You started learning as when you moved there.
Yeah, so the funny thing is that when I moved here, I was 34 weeks pregnant with my second child.
Yes.
And I do joke that I learned a few choice words in the delivery room, but one of them was push because we tried to keep it pretty simple. So yeah, I do know exactly what you mean, and it's great to immerse yourself and kind of have no option but to kind of get on with it and start learning.
Yes.
And then really enjoy the conversations where you get to be in your comfort zone, which is kind of speaking in your native language as well.
Exactly. And how wonderful is it now that we have technology to help us, right? Like if you just like, hello phone, right?
Oh, you
So
have
easy
no idea
now.
how
Like
much.
it's so easy. I know. I remember I mean, we got married almost 21 years ago. And, the other day I was decluttering the house and I found actual roadmaps. I'm like, that's how we got around back then. Cause we went to the East Coast of Canada for our honeymoon. And it was like, we just followed the map. And there was no internet. There was no cell phone. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have maps. It was like, you just trust that you'll get there and, communicate via payphones. And, I'm like, how? Like our kids would be so lost.
Oh, absolutely. I remember traveling about 20 years ago, I guess, and, sending postcards home from Europe to Australia, using the payphone to talk to my parents, probably asking for money, things were different for sure.
Yes, things are so different. But that's not why we're here today. We're here. You're here to talk about guest speaking and storytelling for business growth, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think we've already started doing it. This is the way we
Yes.
connect, by stories, right? We
Yes.
started to get to know each other and found that we had things in common. And who would have thought that? We're just two strangers on the internet that
I
found each
know.
other.
I know it's so amazing that we can do that, right? Like you can make friends anywhere now. Like it's so amazing and build connection and all this stuff. And you're right with the stories. But before we get going, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Bri Williams. I am from Australia originally, and I spent a decade in the UK, and I now live in the south of France, and I've been here for about 5 years. So I do often get mistaken for someone from England, but I am from Australia originally, and I'm a speaking strategist. So when I was starting my own business about 4 years ago, I started something called How to Present, which was public speaking coaching and helping out businesses that had speakers that were getting ready for big events, whether they were leaders or experts. And that was really because that's the world that I'd come from. I had over 16 years in learning and development. I'd managed teams, and I came from this educator's background, essentially. And I had this expectation that because I had come from, reasonably senior position in those businesses, that I kind of just turn up and, open my shop doors virtually and go, all right, I'm ready. Come and keep me busy with, coaching. And funnily enough, it didn't work like that. Super optimistic me. I found myself for the first kind of 4-6 months thinking, wow, okay, so no one knows I'm here. What am I going to do? And really kind of had to figure out how I was going to do that in the face of a little bit of imposter syndrome, if I'm being totally honest, extreme levels of procrastination, and being a little bit scared of live video. So I've been a speaker pretty much my entire career in one form or another, where I was training or speaking at events and, being the leader essentially. And, I looked at a webcam lens or the lens on my phone, and I just couldn't put sentences together. And I was constantly warring in my mind with these words of, you're a public speaking coach and you can't speak. I was struggling. I really was struggling initially with just the whole live video element. So I had to sort that out. I had to figure out who it was that I could help the most. And I ended up with two kind of focus areas in my business. One is to continue this corporate speaking that I do, where I go and talk about public speaking, leadership, career development, and also on the other side, where I speak to people that are exactly in the same position as I was when I started, and kind of continuing their journey as an online entrepreneur who wants to use speaking to market their business. Because I really did have to figure that out for myself, overcome my own kind of roadblocks, but also the roadblocks of trying to connect with people in a way that feels genuine. I don't want to use that authentic word, but really, before it was overused as a marketing term, being yourself, being able to feel like you can be as much yourself online, in front of a camera, in person, speaking on a stage as you would whether you're having a conversation with a friend or a client, or a peer. So working on those two focuses led me to storytelling and speaking, and how you really put those two things together to grow your business.
I love it. I love it. And storytelling is so important now more than ever, right? Like, especially like there's more and more and more online businesses. And so I think that it's easier to get lost and so using our stories can make us stand out, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think the thing that we often fall into when we know we have to be visible, but we still struggle with that visibility a bit, is telling really generic stories. So feeling like we're sharing parts of ourselves, but not really. So kind of holding back, or just really hitting all the high notes, like, oh, life's amazing, I've got 1 million clients and I'm like a 17-figure whatever, and like it's really one note. It doesn't really give a lot of, like, I think of it as kind of music, or the flow. When you tell stories, you want to take people on a journey. When you're a speaker, you want to take people on a journey. And when you're only ever hitting high notes, if you're just listening to this on audio, I'm kind of like, drawing a straight line across here. It just doesn't connect with people. It's like, oh, it's okay. Great to hear that everything's, awesome for you. Meanwhile, over here, I'm like struggling to make videos, or I've sent out a bunch of emails and I haven't had any replies. Like it doesn't connect with people if there's none of that reality of the experience that your audience is going through. So knowing what type of stories and how to actually share those stories, and how you can also really, without bragging, share your credentials, share the things that you actually have done and the things that you're good at, so that people get to know you and what you're great at. Because if you are trying to increase the size of your business, if you want to get more clients or sell more digital products or whatever it is, you have to let people know what you offer as well. So doing that in a way that feels really natural.
I love it. I love that. I love that. So what are the most common challenges for experts that want to speak but haven't made any progress yet? Because we're like we all start at the same place, right? Like, I mean, for some of us, it comes easier, but for some of us, it's a little bit harder, right? And so, like, I know for myself, it's weird because when I was a kid, I had no problems in being in public speaking competitions and stuff like that. And then when I did network marketing, about 10 years ago, I had no problem going up front and, talking to people about the opportunity or doing trainings and things like this. But then when it was time to, turn my phone on and, show up on stories and stuff like that, I was like paralyzed. It's so weird. And then, so what are your tips, or the most common challenges for experts?
Yeah, I mean, what I see all the time, and I know can be a problem for many people starting out with speaking, is that they just want to do speaking anywhere. Any good gig sounds like a good gig. And so when they find themselves like 3 or 6 months down the line, they're like, I don't know if this is actually making a difference. And it's really because without a goal that's specific to speaking, or without a strategy, you end up doing a lot of random stuff. So, things that, over time will accumulate. But what I think that really helps people who are kind of scattershot, and this happens to people who have speaking confidence, actually, because they, like you said, I had no problem standing up and doing this. So if someone said to you, hey, will you come speak on my podcast? You go, yeah, sure. Hey, do you want to come speak at this event? Yeah, sure. Hey, do you want to come speak at the local, festival? And it's going to be a craft, and you're like, yeah, sure, because I feel confident to do that. Whereas if, and there can be some confusion around what opportunities will actually help your business grow. And I think the first thing to do is just think, well, what do I want out of speaking? What's the goal here? And for some people now, it's travel. I don't really need to be paid to be on that stage, as long as I know that there are ideal buyers in that audience who may be coaching clients, consulting clients. They may be buying digital products. Maybe getting paid up front isn't a big deal to you. You'd rather just be in the room and building your network, meeting the right people, creating collaborations. Maybe that's the goal. And travel too, right? Because we've been stuck at home forever. And maybe it is that your ideal is virtual speaking, and you only want to do podcasts or summits because you know very much the time involved in that. You can easily slot it into your calendar. You can wear your jammy bottoms if you want to, if you don't feel like dressing Fully that day.
I just rotate tops.
I know COVID tops became a search item.
I know.
Zoom tops.
Yes.
So it's what is your goal? What do you actually want out of speaking? And a lot of people have big ideas and kind of dreams, visions of what they want speaking to be. And then we need to look at, well, what's your starting point? Are you speaking at all? Are you doing a certain type of speaking, but it's not necessarily aligned to where you want to go? So working out your starting point, where you want to go, and the steps in between is oversimplifying, but essentially where people often go wrong. They don't really consider that you don't command a 5K speaking fee without any speaking experience previously, right?
Yeah.
The starting point where you want to go.
I know, but that's so good because like, I didn't even think about that. Like, what's my goal? Like before, I just kind of just went into it. And then I think I figured out my goal after when I saw that. I saw the things started happening after I hosted a summit, after I was, part of summits and stuff like that. I'm like, ooh, I like what's happening here, but I didn't know that before. So what can be some of our goals? Like you mentioned, is it the networking? Is it the, the people purchasing your products? Like, what are some of the goals that we can, potentially have from our speaking gigs, whether that's on stage at an actual conference or speaking at a summit or being a guest podcast speaker, a podcast guest.
If I highlight two particular strategies that I think are really interesting to online entrepreneurs and content creators, and the first one is, as you said, hosting a summit. And what people don't think about necessarily off the bat is list building, right? Business growth and list building off social media, making greater connections with people, building the relationship. So your email list is a currency in and of itself, right? There's a strength, and
it really is
an asset.
It really is. I always say it. I'm like, there's money in the email list.
Right. So a lot of times people spend their energy applying and, pitching and doing lots of outreach, and they can feel really burnt out through that experience of, I'm not really getting a lot of responses, or the things I'm getting responses for, I don't know if it's like really the opportunity. And this comes back to having a goal and pitching, or applying to the right things in the first place. But, it can, you feel like you're asking, like you're really like reaching out and trying to get. Whereas I think the energy of hosting is quite different. You're providing a platform, you're creating an experience. You can be creative in what you are producing, and, that speaker selection process. I think that's really exciting. And you also become a speaker in that. You are the leader of all of the speakers. So I think that's a really interesting strategy to pursue. And of course, I know, Julie, you and I would both highly recommend Jenny Wright as a person to reach out to if that's of interest, because I know she's the top of that game. Absolutely.
I know, she's amazing.
I
hired her to help me host my first summit. And like, it was such a great experience. All in all, we became friends, because how can you not? But also, when I hosted my second summit, I was like, Jenny, can I book you for a couple of calls so that you can, help me just like, maybe bring it up a notch. So yeah, she's great.
She is absolutely incredible and just beyond professional, organized, and just the nicest person. But results, like it's great to be nice, but also results, like they're really
results.
Like when you see behind the curtain on summits, even as a speaker, even if you're not ready to host, but looking at it as a speaker, they're really an incredible way to network. So using that summit example, if you're not the host, but you are a speaker, networking with fellow speakers, going ahead and figuring out who in that speaker lineup has aligned podcasts or other summits, or has a community or a membership. These people that are on the speaker lineup are doing similar things to you. They have similar goals. They want to create great content. So that side of stage networking is so super valuable as well. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think a lot of people miss that opportunity. And it really is where some of like great friendships and collaborations are born. So
I agree. And, that's my goal. Like when I host a summit, my goal is for the speakers to make connections. Like that's one of my biggest goals because I get the connection, I make the connections with every single speaker because I pre-record my trainings / interviews. But I want them also to, benefit from the group of people that I'm bringing together for future, relationships, collabs, whatever. Like it's, it's game changing. I think that when you start making relationships and being, when you start making biz besties, as we call them, right, and collaborations and stuff like that, it can be game changing and it can really change your business. And also, like, how they say, like, business is lonely. I disagree wholeheartedly. I'm like, I have more biz besties than I do actual friends in Ottawa. You know what I mean? For
well,
real.
People that do understand, like really understand intimately what it's like to do what you do. Whereas some of your friends, who perhaps you've known for a long time, they don't necessarily have that same experience or day-to-day kind of,
and that's another
running of
thing,
your.
right? Yeah. Having that in commonalities, like sometimes, we hang out with like our, friends from like a long time ago or whatever, but it's hard to talk business with them, to talk shop with them, right? And so having that go-to person or a few go-to persons that understand business and that you can bounce ideas off of and, just, sometimes vent because we need to do that sometimes, but it's so rewarding having that in our business, and it just definitely makes the journey a lot more enjoyable. Like me and you, like we didn't know each other before, but we've seen each other online, and look, now we're new biz besties.
Look at how that works. I love it too. I think it's that community really does matter.
The community aspect, for sure. For sure. And I think it's important to mention as well that, the more you participate in summits and bundles or speak on stages and things like that, the more you are creating that recognition, that recognizable factor for yourself and your brand, right? Like the more you are on these platforms, different variety of different platforms, the more people are going to start recognizing you and knowing you. And so now you're going to become a recognizable brand. And like, who doesn't want that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, tying it back to the speaking side of things, when you're going to these summits and you're, applying or pitching for the opportunity, you want to be talking about similar topics each time. But of course, you don't want to be pitching exactly the same talk to the same host the next year. So you have to be focused on what your core or signature talks are so that you have this kind of ready go-to material that you are getting yourself booked for, but you can be keeping it fresh. And of course, you want to make sure that you're tailoring it to the summit and what the focus is for the summit, as well as the audience within that summit. So, are we looking at, a list building summit, or is it a marketing or a branding, or, what is it that the summit is focused on, and how does that translate with your particular talk, so that you can change up the title, you can change up the examples within your talk as well, so it's fresh. But keeping in mind that the speakers that tend to rise up in terms of what they get paid and their brand essentially is because they talk about the same thing a lot. So you have to really be passionate about the topics that you choose to talk about, because if you're doing it well, you are going to be talking a lot about the same thing. So you have to make peace with that level of repetition, if you like, and find ways to kind of go deep on your topic. Instead of trying to constantly come up with new ideas and a broad range of topics that you can talk about, you really need to stay in your lane and kind of hold steady, even when you feel like you might be getting a little bit like, I don't know if I can do this again. Like, you've got to find an angle.
Yes,
Go deep.
For sure. I love that. I love it. So what sort of speaking has had the biggest impact in your business growth?
Well, I mean, summits definitely in terms of the networking side of things, but I also want to shout out podcasts as well, because I think that even though it's a longer term growth strategy, the relationship that you build with the host and also the quality of the conversation that you have, and just the discoverability of podcast, and it really is an evergreen talk, if
It
you will,
is.
and that can be discovered at any time in the future. So I really love that. But I would have to mention also the corporate speaking that I do and some of my clients do is a really great way to, as long as you keep that pipeline full, is a really good way to be invoicing for speaking, to actually be charging for speaking, as opposed to using speaking as a marketing tool. So, whether it's corporate or not, thinking about larger organizations within your industry that have a group, a community, a resource group, someone who would benefit from having an experienced professional speaker with a high value topic. And often they're going to want to tie that to a return on investment. So as a result of this talk, your listeners or your audience will be able to, thinking a bit more like an educator in that sense, and going in perhaps with a free talk even that might lead to paid opportunities. And if you've never done this before, that's a great way to get your foot in the door. Lunch and learn, going to breakfast networking events where they have guest speakers, doing some free stages, or even a LinkedIn outreach strategy where you say, listen, I've got this 20 or 30-minute talk that I do. This is what people love about it. I'm willing to do this for free because I'd like to think that if I do a good job and you have a need for whatever your services are, you might think of me in the future, right?
Exactly.
Having a link to a video that shows you speaking. It's a great way to get in front of new audiences. And referrals. I mean, 2/3 of paid speakers are saying that most of their leads come from referrals. So it really is about your network then, and doing a great job.
It is because, even I started with guest speaking on podcasts because that felt like, it just feels like, the natural progression, but it just also makes you have more confidence of speaking, and on stage. And it's great. It's great to start that, you're meeting the people and things like that. And it gets you, like, sometimes, depending, some podcasts, interviewers, hosts, do the video as well, and some don't, but it's a great way to get started and get your foot in the door. But I have to say that, having hosted my own summit and having participated in summits and different live events over the last 6 months, I get asked now all the time, hey, I have this coming up. Do you want to be part of it? Do you want to be a speaker? Do you, so those opportunities and the doors open for those, different opportunities. So how can experts get booked more often?
Well, I think you really are saying
right.
One of the ways.
Yes,
one of the ways is to just get started. And for people who aren't speaking at all at the moment, they're like, okay, how do I do that? So if you are interested in summits or podcasts in particular, Facebook is a great platform for finding communities, for podcast opportunities. Like, there's one group that has 40,000 people in there. And if you're not seeing a podcast host there who's got a call for speaker that matches your need, I mean, you'd be pretty unlucky, frankly. And also summits and collaboration communities. There are plenty of Facebook communities where you can find opportunities. Just use hashtag call for speakers, see what you find. And I always issue this invitation for any of these interviews that I do, because if you don't find a speaking opportunity that you're looking for when you're searching on Facebook, if it's a summit or a podcast, and honestly, send me a message. I will find you one. I promise you, there are so many out there. And it might just be a tweak of the keywords that you're using. But there are so many opportunities out there. And really just getting to know those communities. So when you do get booked for something, which it will happen, attending the speaker kickoff call. This is where all the speakers get together, and the host will often run through key information, but also everyone gets a chance to introduce themselves. So think about what you want to say at that speaker kickoff call, because, all of a sudden, it's not a pitch, but it is a way to introduce yourself in a way where people are like, oh, I like the sound of that. And they start sending you connection requests, messages. Oh, I've got this podcast. What do you think about that? So, just thinking about how you speak about yourself as a business owner and a speaker as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the kickoff calls are my favorite.
I love.
I love them. Okay, what should experts focus on when they do have the opportunity to speak?
Yeah, I mean, really the rehearsal element, I can't stress enough, because if you are a busy business owner, it's oftentimes you're coming up to these speaking opportunities and it's one of the very many things that you've got to do in your week. So really making sure you carve out time to prepare yourself, because all of that time is the greatest investment for how you're going to speak and show up on the day. And the thing that those who are already confident speakers will often do is miss parts of their talk because they're happy talking and they're kind of like in the flow of things. And so being really clear on what your goal is for that talk, what your, if you are able to make an offer from that stage, or you're talking about a particular lead magnet, like being really clear on how it is that you want to share that. And specifically the stories that you want to share as well, because those are what people will connect with above all things. I mean, the statistics show that that stories light up 22 times more neural pathways in our brain than facts and figures alone. So if you can tell a story, if you can show people what's possible for them, using stories of transformation where people can really see like a starting point right the way through to what is possible in the world, that's what's going to really help them think, Julie's the person for me, or nope, that's definitely not for me. And we're cool with that, right? We want to draw the right ones in, and say thanks, nice to meet you, and repel those that aren't a good fit.
Exactly. And speaking of stories, so stories are a huge part of connecting with your audience. Are there any stories our experts should tell in particular, or what should they steer clear of?
So I think you have to be very clear from the outset what your storytelling boundaries are. I know some people are perfectly okay to share all and any personal stories. Other stories are still in progress. I have an example of where, so before I moved to France, I lived in the UK for 10 years with my now husband, and he was very, very ill when our eldest was about 2 years old. And he had cancer. He had to go through treatment. He had many years of, being like, this health story was a work in progress. It was something that I couldn't speak about, in fact, because it just, it wasn't resolved. And so I felt like I was holding a massive part of myself, and I didn't figure out how or what I was comfortable sharing. I just kept it all back. And when he got like that 5-year in remission kind of sign off from the doctor, I was like, I feel a weight released from me. I feel like I can talk again about a massive part of, my personal and professional life. That is now kind of, it kind of felt like it had healed or become something that I could talk about more easily. And, for many people, they may have had like a defining moment. Maybe it was a rock bottom moment. Maybe it was, an absolute high and, kind of accomplishment moment that they want to be able to speak about. Oftentimes speakers are talking about overcoming adversity, right? So having an opportunity to be able to speak about that, but also find the lessons in it, find the connection points for the people in the audience that you really do want to speak directly to, those that you can help with the message that you've got to share. And then, getting organized with just a very simple structure of how you want to tell that story, so that you spend just the right amount of time on the build up, just the right amount of time on the rock bottom, and don't lose people along the way when you get to talking about the turning point and, where that brings you to in present day. So I just really spending time on that craft, really digging deep and discovering those stories so that you can then put them together in a way that truly reflects the story and how you want to tell it. And then you can share that from the stage.
I love it. I love it. And I think it's important to remember also, it's okay to be vulnerable, right? And no story is too little or too big to share. Like, I think that sometimes we can get caught up in that. And I was talking about that with someone last week. I forget who now, but it's because sometimes we think that maybe our story is not good enough, right? Or maybe that people aren't going to care. And so, which is totally nonsense, not true. Like every individual, every person's story is unique and special in their own way. And there's only one of you, and you're going to reach the right people by sharing that story, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's something awful that happened that you've overcame it, but maybe it's not. Maybe you don't have something awful that you overcame. Maybe it's something, more like small, like, but it doesn't matter that it's not as important as the bigger stories, right?
Yeah. And I find that is one of the blocks that people have around storytelling. It's like, oh, I haven't had this big, exciting or dramatic event happen in my life. Like, what are people actually going to be interested in this? And what I say to that is this. It doesn't always have to be your story that you're telling either. We want to be able to tell stories that demonstrate, that show what it is that we're talking about. So it could be the story of your client with their permission, of course, and it could be the story of someone who's well known in your industry, it needs to, stories are a device, if you like, to demonstrate the key point that you're sharing. So it really adds the weight to the words, to the idea that you've put in front of people. So stories are incredibly powerful. But if you think about it, it doesn't always have to be your story that you're telling. Unless that's exactly what the talk is calling for. The stories that you want to draw on are the ones that best show your audience the point that you're trying to make.
I love it. So permission to go out there and be yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. You have an amazing freebie for the listeners. What is it? It's the story selling from the stage workbook. Like, I feel like I need that right now.
It's all yours. I mean,
yes.
The idea behind this workbook is that it actually came from my paid program, my group coaching program. And I was working through it with a couple of my clients. And I thought, there's so much in this that people can get in terms of just trying to dig a little bit deeper on discovering the stories. So for those people who think, I don't really have a story, or I don't really know how I want to tell my story, or what stories are right for my audience, this will help you with that. It helps you step through the discovery process. It also gives you a really simple structure, which we call the pointy one, but essentially is walking you through a number of points in your story that you need to have there in order for your audience to be taken on a journey. So we want to help people feel and think and act differently as a result of hearing you speak about this. So this will help you pull that together, and then thinking about how and where you want to share that from the stage. So the workbook is actually something that I pulled out of the program, and I thought I want to get it out there.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I'm like going to go download that right when we finish. So I'm going to have that in the show notes if you're listening and you want this amazing workbook. I think we all should download it, because we should all be telling our story no matter what it looks like, right? So Bri, this is such a good conversation. But if the listeners are like, I want to know more, where can we find you, and how can we work with you?
So go ahead and connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn. That's where I spend the most time. I also have a Facebook community, which is Pro Speaking for Entrepreneurs. And as it sounds like, it's, making money from speaking, whether that's marketing or paid speaking for online entrepreneurs. So it really is a place where you can ask lots of questions and just, get to know the amazing community that's there as well. And I do have a number of ways to work with people depending on what their starting point is. But one of the programs that people love is the Pro Speaking, the Pro Speaker Income Launch Program, which helps you pull together your signature talk and then put you on those stages to connect with the buyers in your audience. So that's also a great way to work together.
I love it. And I'm going to have all those links in the show notes as well. So make sure to follow Bri. Make sure to download that amazing freebie. Thank you so much, Bri. This has been so good. I'm learning, even like after hosting 2 summits and being a guest speaker on podcasts and summits, I'm still learning, right? Like, I think I'm at the place now where I also have to finesse my story or my stories and kind of bring them into a little bit more of my, my emails, my serving, my services, and all the things, right? So that's where I'm at now. Because, running a business, building a business, it's a lot of moving parts, right? There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's absolutely okay to not having all together at any given time, right? We can, it's a journey, right? Enjoy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's trust the process, enjoy the journey, right? Again, thank you so much, Bri. It's been so awesome chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to hear your stories.
I love it. No pressure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Build Your Beautiful Business podcast. If you did, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Julie's included a link in the shows to make it nice and easy for you. And if you want to create a beautiful, profitable business of your own, make sure to go unlock your access to Julie's 6 must-have resources for female entrepreneurs. These resources will help you build and grow your business with simplicity and ease. You can find them at juliecbutler.com/freebie vault. We'll see you in the next episode.